Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines, and there's certainly plenty to talk about with the Observer's chief leader writer Sonia Sodha and the political commentator Salma Shah with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome to both of you. So to the front pages, let us crack on with those. The Financial Times leading with testimony from the January the 6th Insurrection Committee in Washington, where it was today alleged that former President Donald Trump attempted to join the armed mob storming the Capitol, even going so far as trying to grab the steering wheel of his limousine. The Eye has word of First Minister Nicola Sturgeon's announcement that the Scottish Government intends to hold a second independence referendum in October next year. That is also the lead story for The Guardian, as you can see. Well, reporting on the sentencing in the Maxwell case, the Metro has the headline, Gillian caged for 20 years. And the Telegraph hears that Boris Johnson is involved in an ongoing disagreement with the Defence Secretary and the head of the Army, who want to increase military spending. Well, a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let us bring in our guests then, Sonia Sodha and Salma Shah. Welcome to both of you. Well, here we are then. Let's start with the Eye, Salma, shall we? Sturgeon's new bid to split from the UK, announcing a plan. But realistically, how far will she get with it?
Well, there are a lot of caveats to this plan because clearly Westminster is not granting her a new referendum. So she is saying that she will go for one on October 19th next year, and that she is going to ask the Lord Advocate, which is the chief legal officer in the Scottish Government, to negotiate the legality of this in the UK court. So she is trying to find a way to make this referendum stick, as it were, and make it legal and make it workable so that it actually becomes a reality. I think there's going to be a lot of toing and froing about this. Certainly Westminster is going to try and hold it back, but she's also said that she's going to make the next election it's a single issue election about independence in order to try and gain that mandate to do it. So it is not clean cut, and it looks like it's going to be messy for a long time yet.
And in fighting the next general election on one issue, is there a danger that that actually helps the Conservative Party? Certainly, does it wipe Labour off, do you think, Sonia?
Well, I think when you take a step back from this, you have to ask, why would you try and have a referendum on Scottish independence next year, given that the last one was only 8 years ago? If you look at Scottish opinion polls, things haven't changed very much. Polls continue to show a majority for staying in the UK. And if you look at polling on whether voters want a referendum next year in Scotland, fewer than a third of voters, Scottish voters, think a referendum is a good idea. And there's a lot of SNP voters for whom it's not a priority, that's shown in the polls. So you've got to ask the question, why is Nicola Sturgeon doing this? And I think it is because she wants to distract, actually, from, the SNP have been in government in Scotland for a long time, like any government who's been in government a long time. There are voters who've fallen away from them. Some of the SNP's domestic record is really quite patchy. So obviously she wants the next election to be about Scottish independence, the SNP's raison d'etre, because the SNP don't want to be held to account for some of the domestic failings that voters up in Scotland are starting to notice. So I think this actually is very cynical by Nicola Sturgeon. In the big picture, in the grand scale of things, I'm in favour of self-determination, but there's no evidence to suggest the Scottish people want a referendum next year. It feels like quite a cynical ploy by the SNP.
And the SNP also, Salma, suggesting that obviously the aim would be to rejoin the European Union, the single market and so on, and they will be publishing plans soon about what to do about that hard border between Scotland and England. Very complicated, we guess, but would Northern Ireland's experience, do you think, affect voting on the issue if there was ever to be a referendum?
Well, potentially it will affect voting on the issue. Of course, Northern Ireland's situation is unique because, of course, there is the Good Friday Agreement to consider, and it is a lot more about the history of Northern Ireland. What I think is more interesting about the EU dimension is whether the EU would be welcoming Scotland with open arms, given that there are so many issues around Europe, not least in Spain, with Basque separatists, thinking about how actually other countries might try and apply to the EU to be able to have some kind of credibility when they break away from where they are currently. So there are a lot of dynamics at play here, and it's not necessary that the EU would consider Scotland for membership straight off the bat.
Well, certainly Nicola Sturgeon is pictured on the front page of the Financial Times, but their lead story is this surprise testimony we've had, some extraordinary testimony, and what we learned about Donald Trump's behaviour and reaction as the Capitol riots unfolded, Sonia, that he wanted, he says, to join his people.
I mean, it's just sort of jaw-dropping, the stuff that we're learning through these congressional hearings. And today the revelation is that Trump wanted to go out there, wanted to join these protesters who descended on the Capitol, broke through security with weapons, were threatening people in the Capitol building. And he wanted to go and join them. And, he was told that he couldn't by his security, and then he sort of tried to grab the steering wheel and even put his hands around the neck of the person who told him that he couldn't do it. I mean, it's just really kind of quite extraordinary stuff. This is a former president of the United States that we're talking about. So, I mean, who would have thought that we would have been here? It is just extraordinary. It's kind of hard to sort of find the adequate words to describe it. But we're also learning a lot about not just what happened today, but what was going on behind the scenes, what Trump was doing to sort of try and prevent the smooth transition of the presidency, the election that he lost to President Biden. So, I mean, it's just unbelievable that in one of the largest democracies of the world, this is what it came to.
And this is Cassidy Hutchinson, the young aide to Mark Meadows, the right-hand man of Donald Trump, Salma. And the quotes are really extraordinary. She went on to say that Trump had said of his armed supporters, they're not here to hurt me. Take their swear word, take the mags away, meaning the metal detectors that have been placed to secure the Capitol. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. That he agreed with the comments they'd said about Mike Pence, who'd been trying to ruin the election result, and so on. Does any of this have any impact, though, on Donald Trump's supporters and the likelihood of him running again?
Well, this is the huge question, isn't it? Because, are these congressional hearings actually going to end up in ensuring that Donald Trump is no longer able legally to be able to be on the ticket or run as president again? So we know that his supporters are diehard. We know that they are still believe in Trump, and that Trump is definitely trying to keep that flame alive for his next potential run. And I think there is going to be a lot of pressure on these congressional hearings to try and be definitive about this. And I think the Republican Party is waiting to see what's going to happen here, because the Trump endorsement in a lot of quarters in the Republican Party still matters. And that is a very scary thing when you read the details from this testimony. I mean, he clearly was in a position of transferring power from himself as president onto the next president, and was essentially allowing people that he probably knew had weapons to march on the Capitol and refer to them as his people. This is very tribalistic. It is very scary. And I think the fact that a lot of people are still waiting to see whether this potentially leads to him still getting on a presidential ticket for the Republican Party is actually quite frightening.
Yes, indeed. Some might say it should lead to criminal action, but there we are. Let's go to the Metro now, shall we, Sonia? This is the news that Gillian Maxwell has been jailed for 20 years, fined as well, 5 years supervision on top of that. It takes her to 80 and beyond with all of that, I guess. And an apology from her in court today to those who were there about her association with Jeffrey Epstein, this disgraced financier, rather than specifically her actions in this.
Yeah, it was an apology that wasn't really an apology, I think, if you read the words, and considering the trauma and the suffering she inflicted on those women who were children at the time. I mean, she was convicted of sex trafficking and, participating in the sexual assault of children. Those words just don't come close to sort of taking responsibility for the evil that was inflicted on those girls, on those young women. So it's a long sentence. I expect some people will think that it should potentially be even longer, but I think the question is where is he? It's absolutely right that she faces accountability for the appalling role she played in the sex trafficking and rape of these young women, but and no men have been held accountable. There's obviously Jeffrey Epstein, who's now dead, but we know that these girls were trafficked not just for Epstein, but for other rich, powerful men, and somehow they have not faced consequences. They've not faced accountability for their actions, and I just don't know how that can be allowed to stand by prosecutors.
Sonia, Salma, there is so much to talk about. We will move on, take a quick break, come back with the news that after a series of failings, the Met Police has been put into special measures. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Sonia Sodha and Salma Shah. Welcome back to both of you. So let's go to the Times, Sonia. One thing has led to another, and now the UK's biggest police force is in special measures. But indeed, the organisation who's brought this talks about systemic problems now, including all those scandals. So what do you make of the news tonight?
Well, I think this is hardly going to come as a surprise to people who've been following stories about the performance of the Met in the last sort of 12 to 24 months. And it's a long time coming. And it sounds like the report's going to make extremely concerning reading. So it references all of the terrible failings that have come to light in the last year or two in the Met, institutional misogyny, institutional racism, the treatment, the strip search of a black child Q, completely innocent in her school, the massive failures of the investigation into the murders committed by Stephen Port. So that's, evidence of institutional homophobia, the sexist and misogynist messages between Charing Cross police officers. The list just goes on. And what else is emerging is that the inspector also looked at kind of key performance indicators and found that the Met were performing well below national standards on things like answering and handling 999 calls, huge numbers of crimes going investigated, 69,000. So it all adds up, I think, to an incredibly damning picture that won't be a surprise to lots of people. And I think, in many ways, the question is, how has it taken so long for this to happen and for the inspectorate to go in and have a look at things? But it's very good that it's been done. But big questions about the extent to which new leadership in the Met will be able to get a grip of this.
Yes, Matt Parr, the Watchdog's inspector for London, said the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by a serving officer, of course, we remember, had a chilling effect on public trust and confidence. But it was a recent force-wide inspection which prompted the move to special measures. Parr cited 14 new failures, including a barely adequate standard of crime recording accuracy. So lots for them to look into. Sam, I just want to finish with the pictures that are all over the newspapers of the extraordinary woman who was Dame Deborah James, who was very sadly, the announcement from her family has died.
Yeah, absolutely tragic news. And yet we knew that this day was going to come soon because Deborah has campaigned about it, talked about it. And yet somehow it just still seems quite surreal that she's not there, because even towards the end, she's full of so much life and campaigning to the end about her condition of bowel cancer and making sure that people understood what was how they needed to check themselves and the extremeness of the illness that takes you. So just incredibly sad news, very sad for her family, but what an amazing legacy, even though her age of 40 years is nothing at all.